we also really try to get people to come out to that. But particularly with the sessions that we've had, it's funny, I saw Trisha with the Robert's Rules, the parliamentary procedure one, we had 50 people the entire session. So which is great because we want, people to really bone up, frankly, on that information. And same thing with the other session. So that's one. Two, we Holiday of Lights, the 125th Street bid, in partnership or how shall I say, 125th Street bid every year puts on a parade and to celebrate the launch or the kickoff of the Holiday of Lights season, which the 125th Street bid covers the entire or most of 125th with beautiful lights that go across the street. And there's a kickoff with a parade and music and lots of things. Our office has traditionally done an event in our office. Barbara Askins of the bid asked if we would move it over to Columbia because they started recently doing one over there as well. So we shifted over into Victor's neck of the woods and held two events, actually. One that was really great that was at Columbia, that was right at the kickoff of the parade. But because we didn't want to lose our local, event out of our office, we also held a smaller one that was, cookies and hot chocolate just for community members. We invited residents of Grant and Manhattanville houses, and all the businesses were right there on the block. And so it was a lovely celebration of the holiday season. That was a couple of days ago. It's been an extremely busy week. That was on Tuesday. Both two events overlapping on Tuesday night. Thank God for Maria de la Cruz, who runs our events team. Although still talking about Maria de la Cruz, it is her season. We are giving away lots of turkeys and groceries. We've had several turkey giveaways. We have two more next Monday and Tuesday. We yesterday gave out 3,500 pounds of produce in partnership with the Hunts Point Market, who donated all the stuff, and their volunteers also came and packed. Our volunteers, and many of you know, we have you all know, we have a volunteer corps that's up to 450, maybe more volunteers. So every time we show up at a new facility, we have some new face that there to help us and to help our office do the things. We also, speaking of volunteers, and Trisha and Keisha Smith held our first day of action where we cleaned 5 sites in New York, in Manhattan. 4 of them New York City parks. One of them a strip of 9th Avenue and 12th Street. There are many of you, I know, I saw Russell, you shaking your head. One's in your district. So yes, we had several, it was 5. It was amazing. Interestingly, Parks, who donated some things. What did they donate to? No, they just knew we were doing it. We weren't able to do it. Trisha was successful in getting Depot to donate picker-uppers and gloves, etc. And they also brought volunteers, so that was really helpful. What was funny was that Parks showed up and cleaned a couple of the parks before we got there. Thought you'd like that part. But yeah, that was fun. And then finally, I think you all saw the amended agenda for today, where OCM is not on the agenda for today, nor for tomorrow for Borough Service Cabinet. And so we have, I saw your furrowed brow over there. They are coming. We have set up a new date. Get your pens out. It is going to be November 29th at 6 p.m. Again, please send to your liaisons the number of cases that you are receiving and any questions that you have, any issues. Questions and notes over to us so we can get them to OCM. And hopefully they will be prepared to answer questions.
I just want to make a comment because we have our meeting tonight with applications. I had people walking through the door at 8 o'clock at night because we had a meeting trying to drop stuff off. I called yesterday during the day to ask 3 or 4 basic questions from their helpline and public basic. No answers, no information. Spent 20 minutes on the phone, with a list of questions, could not answer basic ones, and then said, you'll have to email. Well, I already have the experience of emailing and being over 2 weeks with repeated follow-up. Look,
I hear you.
You want to roll something out, but at least make it so it's possible. I can't even, and that's like the tip of the iceberg. I have absolutely no idea what I have realtors fighting with each other by, sending me, oh no, this realtor is wrong, that this is what the landlord told me here. No, this one can't open here because I have this. I'm like, I don't want to know that. That's like not my business. And then I have people who just are flat unresponsive and think that it's okay. Notification means you don't have to come, but I can't even get straight answers on what the rules are, where we opine and how it will be perceived.
Can you, I hear you 1000% and trust and understand that your frustration is very much absorbed on our end and communicated to them. And I will say it's unacceptable, frankly. It's unacceptable. I understand from a really large structural political reason why they have felt like they needed to use their quote, build the plane, fly the plane while building it while serving drinks or whatever they said. Yes, exactly, which was hard.
They're not Sully. They're not able to land a plane in the middle of the Hudson. Right. This is a mess.
Yeah, it is. It's a total mess. I think the larger reasons are there was so much pressure to get this out quickly. And there were several things happening, but there was so much pressure, I think, to basically launch this industry quickly. Pressure from many different areas. And I've felt for a long time that it was unrealistic. What they were pushing and the pace at which they were pushing was unrealistic. But the flip side of it is, as they have been trying to launch, we have this growth of illicit shops, which they were also trying to push to get the legal shops open so that there would be a market that was legal, as opposed to people going to the illicit shops. I'm not excusing.
I asked that question. I said, if the operator is operating an illicit shop now, yeah, that's what I'm told.
It's supposed to, yes, they're supposed to be using all the enforcement mechanisms to shut it down. And then in the new legislation, it's also supposed to be that the fact that they were an illicit operator is supposed to
make them ineligible.
Exactly, make them ineligible. Oops, someone wrote to you saying that it was.
They didn't write to me. I asked because how long does it take to get something inspected? We asked that in meetings. We couldn't get a timeline on inspection. There is a possibility that before they could be inspected to be illegal, they would be approved for provisional licenses. Because the enforcement division is not, doesn't have a timeline.
It's not fair to just deny them on that basis. We adopted the agenda. We started late this afternoon.
Right.
This topic is not on the agenda. We can spend 3 hours on it.
We could.
So
Say that if you want to connect more on this, you're here in person, you have the ability to step either out or we can like follow up here. But we do have October 29th or November 29th on the agenda. 6 o'clock, you'll see or many emails from me about it. Any other thing report pieces?
That concludes our
Thanks. Okay, cool.
That's the same night as the Borough-based jail design session.
Okay. We are going to move on to our presentation from Department of City Planning on City of Yes for Economic Opportunity. I suspect that it'll take at least a minute for the presentation to come up, so grab coffee if you would like. It's best to do.
Thank you. I have it here. Right there. I just wanted to involve Eric for.
We have Eric or not.
Eric said that he was cutting in and out of.
We have bandwidth issue.
Okay. All right, good.
Notes and or do you want to just say we can talk afterwards.
Yeah, I was I do have like two staff like for like if it's more to have that's great. I think it's gonna have one day off. Every registering fund, I'm gonna like that, and it's like that's what they do when they yeah, you just see.
Yeah, just give it to me.
Yep, I see him.
I just want to come there.
Just give it up with the mouse and you have the presentation open.
Thank you.
Are we all set?
I think we are.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna ask you to please reduce the volume in here so we can keep on going with the presentation. Okay. We're gonna move right into the presentation here. Sorry, guys, I wanna move right along. Okay, so we're gonna push it over to DCP. I just wanna make sure that we're being respectful of everybody's time here.
And I think we're jumping into our intro from our.
We're on meeting, Eric.
On.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Eric, can you speak?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, it sounds like people on Zoom can hear me, but the
1 minute.
We can't hear you yet, Eric.
Okay.
Can you speak again, please?
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Nope.
Nope.
How about now?
Still very low.
Okay. Everyone else on Zoom is saying that they can hear me okay though. So I think it's because of the hookup. We're just not able to hear them.
Okay.
Eric, we're gonna proceed without you, and I'll just do a quick intro for everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Carolyn Grossman-Marr, I'm the Director of Economic Development and Regional Planning for DCP. Obviously, we are joined by my dear colleague Eric Botsford, who many of you know, our Manhattan Director. We also come bringing regards from our Commissioner Dan Grodnick. I know many of you worked with him personally for many years, and he asked us to send his personal regards to you. So we're here today to talk about the City of Yes for Economic Opportunity. This is one of our signature initiatives at DCP right now. The City of Yes has 3 citywide actions in it: carbon neutrality, which came before you earlier this year, and housing opportunity, which is still in the works and will be coming later next year. This work is really coming out of a response to the pandemic, but also a really deep and critical look at our zoning regulations that for really 60 years have not been updated in full, and in a lot of ways that some of which we knew about, some of which we've continued to hear about and gather feedback over the last year and a half of citywide outreach, are really hindering small businesses in ways that are potentially, they're not always evident at front, but when we get into it, we really understand the many different ways that are, it's a death by 1,000 cuts, that we are really doing harm to the city's economy in a number of different ways. And that it's really critical to try and fix these and undo some of the the challenges of the past if we want to have the economy of the future. So that's really what this is laser focused on. It affects really because our, economic opportunity is an enormous topic, affects all different parts of our city and our lives. This is a very wide ranging proposal that is touching a lot of different parts of our commercial zoning. And it is by, therefore, its nature quite complex. Many of your boards, and we thank you for this, have already been engaging on this, going back into last year's info sessions. You've got a lot of the Manhattan planners supported by the City of Yes specialists out at your boards already. And we want to just thank you for that. Thank you in advance for the amount of work that we know the boards are going to have to do in reviewing this really complex text. And hope you feel supported. And that's part of, being here today, to make sure you're aware of all of the resources we have created that try to help break down this complex initiative at the very high level of, what is zoning and how do use groups work, all the way into really more detailed annotations on the text of the zoning changes themselves. So a lot of resources available on our website through your planners. And I'll address one other topic, which is that I know some of the boards have explicitly asked. I think everyone understands just the need for more time on something this big. If you haven't already received it, there is a letter from Commissioner Garodnick really confirming that all of the boards have through January at least to review and vote on the text. So we know that was something that was particularly coming up particularly with the holiday schedules. We know that boards want January. That is available to you as well. And with that, I think I'll hand it over to my colleague Matt to jump into the details of this, but we're happy to talk about the substance today and any ways that we can help you, sort of support through the review of this text. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, everyone. Had the opportunity to meet some of you, but not all. So Matt Moskowitz, Senior Planner in Economic Development and Regional Planning. I'm also the lead planner on City of Yes for Economic Opportunity. So any questions that you might have, email us, economicopportunityplanning.nyc.gov, and we can get you some answers. Because we're short on time, I want to make sure that I cover the highest level of what is in City of Yes for Economic Opportunity, and then spend a bit of time talking more about the resources that we have to help you all in understanding, being able to evaluate proposals. So starting at the highest level, City of Yes, one of 3 citywide text amendments initiatives to modernize our city zoning, to create affordable housing, to promote sustainability, and to support small businesses. It's part of our mayor's agenda and priority for a more equitable and inclusive city for everyone. But before we go into the policy, I think it's helpful to set and talk about how zoning affects businesses. There are hundreds of business classifications or uses in our zoning. They all, for the most part, date to 1961, have not been updated since. And so our uses and the way that we think about businesses really comes from a paradigm that is just completely out of step with today's economy. And we see that with small businesses who might struggle to find where they can locate in zoning. And so they have to go to the Department of Buildings, spend 6 months getting a piece of paper that says you can locate in a storefront space, or they sign that lease and then they get slapped with a fine later on. And so that's the kind of thing in this proposal that we want to address, make it easier for businesses to locate, operate, and grow in the city. Carolyn noted timeline, but over the last year and a half, we've been engaging with many folks, so many of you in this room, as part of 5 citywide public information sessions that we had. We've also spoken with organizations like chambers of commerce, business improvement districts, industrial service providers, small business owners directly, well over 100 meetings over the last year and a half, iterating the proposals you've seen today or will see today. And so now we're in public review. We've had, I think, 27 community board meetings citywide this week alone. So we're out in full force and supporting you all in understanding these proposals. So a lot of what we do here through the meetings we've had, through our zoning help desk, through work we did as an agency prior to the pandemic even, is that zoning often does present a barrier. to operating, starting, and growing a business in New York City. We know there are many ways in which our city's regulatory environment for small businesses is, to put it mildly, difficult at times. But zoning has a way in which it is often operating behind the scenes, making it harder for those businesses to know where they can go, what they can do, and how big they can be, things like that. So we want to make sure that we're addressing the zoning related barriers in this work. And our overarching vision for the initiative is to make sure that our zoning is more simple, more adaptable, and more modern. We have four main goals. The first, we want to make it easier for businesses to find space and grow. The main way we propose to do this is by lifting specific barriers in zoning so that businesses can locate closer to their customers, particularly in storefront space. And doing so will make it easier to fill empty space and combat storefront vacancy as well as office vacancy. Goal 2, supporting and boosting growing industries. These are specific emerging business types where we've identified zoning obstacles that we want to alleviate or at least address, clarify as part of this proposal. Goal number 3, we want to support more business-friendly streetscapes. We know that economic activity isn't just what happens within spaces, but also how a business interacts with its surroundings. And so we want to make sure that we can deliver more active, safe, and walkable streets through streetscape proposals and related. Fourth, and finally, we want to make sure that as we're looking towards the future, we're creating new opportunities for businesses to open in the future by taking a look at the zoning toolkit that we have. We have the as of right zoning, but we also have discretionary processes from the Board of Standards and Appeals, from the City Planning Commission, and zoning tools themselves, the zoning districts. And in many cases, those tools, which also have not been updated since the 60s, are in need of a refresh. And so we took a look at our zoning toolkit as well to make sure that businesses have the pathways they need to grow, expand, adapt over time. So 18 proposals in here, aligned with each of the 4 goals. I'm going to go through them at an extremely high level, but as you can imagine, there's probably at least an hour that I could spend on each of the proposals. And so as we have questions and over the next coming months, please use us as resources to understand some of the nuance behind each of these, as well as any questions you might have surrounding them. So goal number 1. Make it easier for businesses to find space and grow. So these first 6 proposals are all about that limiting that the 1961 zoning resolution has had on business activity, creating a lot of uncertainty and confusion, particularly for small businesses who may not be able to afford to hire a land use attorney, or for whom that is a prohibitively high barrier in order to locate a business. So we really want to zero in on the ability for our city small businesses to be able to find space that works for them. So starting with proposal number 1, reactivating vacant storefronts. There are some parts of our city where if you are in a residential district in 1961, you were allowed to reactivate, that storefront space, no matter how long it was vacant. But in other related residential areas, you can't do that. And this is a clear barrier to storefront vacancy, and we want to remove that 2-year time clock so vacant storefronts have the ability to become reoccupied with a business should they choose to do so. Goal number 2, we have similar zoning districts in our zoning today, C1, C2, typically neighborhood commercial streets with similar business types, similar contexts, and they're located often on opposite sides of a street from one another, and yet they allow for different business types. So we want to simplify the distinctions of use between these 2 districts and allow for a similar mix of business types. Same thing for higher density and more centrally located business districts with our C4, C5, and C6. Simplify the use distinctions between them so you can make it easier to know where businesses can go. Goal proposal number 3, small scale production. Our zoning allows for a range of custom manufacturing in places like Midtown, but it also limits the kinds of makerspace and retail space that we have in our city. This in part is owing to the fact that the nature of manufacturing production has changed dramatically over the last 6 decades. It is no longer the noxious uses that it once was, and there are many kinds of clean production that are not only appropriate, but advantageous to locate along retail streets where they can make things and sell them in the same space. So we're talking about things like coffee roasting, breweries, 3D printing, jewelry making, and the like. And these are businesses where allowing for New Yorkers to be able to make things and sell them in the same space, provided that they're being good neighbors, having stringent environmental protections can allow for entrepreneurship to flourish. But for proposal number 4, if you are one of these maker spaces and you want it to locate above the ground floor, you may often face antiquated loading rules that prohibit your ability to locate in a building. So we want to make sure that you are not having to add additional or unnecessary loading docks for change of use in an existing building. New construction, however, the rules would remain the way they are today. Goal number 5, our zoning today, it allows for a wide range of mixed use buildings in our city, and you can populate a commercial building with a wide range of users. But there's something called stacking rules that prevents you from having, in some areas, residential and office, for example, on the same level, or having commercial uses located above residences. And so this proposal, while taking care to make sure that there would not be any negative sound impacts on surrounding residents, allows for a mix of businesses, either a conversion over time or for new construction where you can have a mixed use building. Proposal 6, we want to wholesale modernize and update the terms we have in our zoning for defining and classifying our businesses. So getting rid of terms like typewriter repair, replacing them with what business types reflect our city's modern economy. And this is really important to make sure that businesses know exactly where you can go and not have to go to DOB or hire an attorney just to be able to clarify that. Goal 2, supporting growing industries. These are 5 business types where we've identified a particular zoning barrier or uncertainty or just ambiguity that we want to make sure is more clear so these industries can flourish across our city. First, urban agriculture. It's clear that you can have a greenhouse in a commercial area, but it's not clear that you could do what you would do in a greenhouse, but in a completely enclosed building in a commercial area. So we want to clarify that and say that you can operate something like a vertical farm in a commercial area office building. We think this is important for making it easier for more food to be grown closer where people live. Life sciences. It's a growing industry in our city today. We want to make it clear on where safe and regulated labs can locate. The city released a memo several years ago that provided some guidance to this effect. But we recognize the fact that the zoning terms still use things like medical or dental. And this is an antiquated term, it's more than 6 decades old, doesn't reflect the way the economy has shifted, and it's tripping people up. And so we want to clarify it and make it clear that laboratories which don't have any potential for objectionable effects or any sort of environmental hazards are appropriate for office settings. Nightlife. The city council repealed the cabaret law several years ago, but zoning still prohibits dancing in many commercial areas. Furthermore, the zoning rules are very confusing on entertainment. So you can have a concert up to 200 people in any commercial district right now. Any bar and restaurant, you can have 200 people with live music, amplified sound, but you can't have comedy. You can't have an open mic. And you can't dance to the live music within those concert halls that are allowed anywhere. So this is the kind of thing that it makes no sense. The last vestiges of cabaret laws, they were used in a discriminatory way over several decades. So we want to remove the restrictions on zoning when it comes to the bodily act of dancing. But we also want to make sure that we're taking care of the quality of life here. And so we're keeping these businesses to the existing size thresholds they have for live music when you're in a C1 or C2 district. And when you're in a higher density district, we're keeping in place the lobby requirements and the distancing requirements that exist today for these kinds of businesses. Admittedly, this is one of the most complicated ones in the entire proposal. And it's one that we've heard a lot about from community boards. So we want to talk with you all as much as you need on this proposal, understanding it, and talk through the many facets of interagency work that have gone into this proposal. Amusements and experiential retail. Our zoning defines things like tennis courts, but it doesn't define things like escape rooms. And in a world in which our zone, in the consumer trends are moving more and more towards people want to do things rather than buy things in the storefront space, the zoning can't keep up. And it means that most experiential businesses have to locate in our city's industrial areas or they choose to locate across the river in New Jersey. So you go over to New Jersey or go up to Westchester and you'll see all kinds of fun, family-friendly activities that are allowed. They're not allowed here in New York City in commercial areas because of the zoning. And so we want to clarify this and say that experiential businesses are allowed, and this will allow for a wider flourishing of business types that match both the demand of consumers today, but also what families need. Lastly, on home occupations. Our zoning allows for a wide range of home-based businesses today, but there are certain types of home-based businesses that are prohibited in our zoning. So you could be a lawyer, you could be a doctor, you could have people visit you in your home, but you can't be a barber, you can't be an interior designer, you couldn't be a stockbroker. Furthermore, the pandemic has really changed the paradigm of work from home. We know that work from home is here to stay, and yet the zoning still has some restrictions. Things like if you're in a studio space, you can only have 25% of your room devoted to home-based business. And so some of the rules don't make sense for today's economy. Other times they were used in a way that doesn't reflect reality in many cases. So we want to make sure that we're taking care to update our home-based business regulations too. Goal 3. These are 3 proposals that think about the way in which a business interacts with its surroundings, particularly the sidewalk and the public right of way in the street. So first, on ground floor designs. Many parts of our city outside of Manhattan don't have any streetscape rules whatsoever, but we've also discovered that many parts of our special districts didn't have the streetscape rules we thought they did. For example, many special districts do not have any rules around transparency that would prohibit something like someone papering over your windows and doors. And so we want to create more consistent, easy to understand ground floor design and make sure that the rules are enhancing the nature of the special purpose districts that you all have. Number 13, reducing conflicts with auto repair. So these are businesses that in many cases, in places in Manhattan, they operate fully enclosed in a building. But in some places, the activity can spill over into the sidewalk, into the public right of way. This creates conflicts with pedestrians, with other vehicles passing by. And so we want to make sure that if you're doing auto repair businesses, that you go through a site plan review with the BSA, have that activity contained within a zoning lot and reduce conflicts with others. Lastly, on micro distribution, we know that the nature of deliveries in our city has changed over recent years. And this is another trend that is only continuing to grow over time. But because the zoning doesn't allow for delivery activity within storefront space, a lot of this activity is happening on the sidewalk, it's happening in the street. We all see it, we all know it. We see these trucks parked like this one, and the status quo is not acceptable. And so part of our work is recognizing the fact that the zoning does not enable that activity within storefront space. We're creating a new type of use that would allow it. And we've been in talks a lot with DOT and understanding the nature between what happens with their programs and what happens with ours to make sure that this kind of activity is allowed to occur, but is allowed to occur in a way that doesn't create congestion and other kind of conflicts that we've seen a lot of in recent years. Goal number 4. I'll finish these up quickly. So these are all ways in which we are expanding our discretionary zoning toolkit beyond the as of right framework so that businesses have pathways to adapt over time. And I'll note each and everything that we are proposing here would go before community boards. And in some cases, they're new districts like number 18, where this would require a full mapping action in order to be implemented. So 15, on campus commercial. We know that in many of our large-scale residential campuses, their zone is residential, so they have limited options for being able to locate something like a bodega or a pharmacy, or we've heard a lot from NYCHA, the desire to have makerspace and more kinds of things like shared commercial kitchens and other kinds of opportunities for entrepreneurship at NYCHA. So we want to create a pathway that allows for a small scale of neighborhood serving retail services and makerspace on residential campuses. This would be a CPC authorization. Corner stores. Many parts of our city that are zoned as residential, there is no path other than a full rezoning to a commercial overlay for a broad range of areas. that would allow for new neighborhood serving storefronts to locate. So we're creating a process that is discretionary. It's another CPC authorization to allow for corner stores in limited circumstances. 17. Oftentimes, the shape of the building is what ends up tripping up someone wanting to build a new building. Film studios in particular face restrictions on things like the minimum height a building has to be before it starts setting back towards the center. Other things around the yard requirements, so how much space you have between the side or the rear of the building, or of a lot, I should say. And so we want to give businesses a path where if the use is allowed in the district, and if they're within the density that's allowed in that district, and they just want to change the shape of the building they want, they have a pathway that isn't a full rezoning to do this. So this would be a CPC authorization for limited bulk relief. And lastly, sometimes we recognize that there are zoning tools themselves that are out of date. It's particularly true for our city's M districts, which largely have not been updated since the original 61 zoning resolution. They at the time didn't conceive of the kind of loft style buildings that even existed at the time and made many of those obsolete and unable to be rebuilt as a new version. So we're creating a suite of new zoning tools that would create a range of densities and heights to expand the zoning toolkit for the future. So with that, Carolyn touched on timeline. We are in the referral period. We want to make sure that you know you have the entirety of January at least to vote on these proposals. At least the beginning of February.
So we, just to be clear, we have not scheduled a public hearing at CPC. That's why we've said, we will definitely not vote in January. We are still working on on our timeline, but we are confirming all of January is available to the community boards and the public.
And will that go out in writing?
It has gone out in writing, but we're happy to, it went out yesterday.
Yeah, it should have gotten to you yesterday.
So our full board is the first Tuesday of the month. Can we do the first Tuesday in February? Is that?
Yeah, I can confirm first Tuesday in February is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you have particular scheduling things, please continue to reach out through your borough liaisons. We are trying to, sort of manage these as best we can, to not put any boards in a bind where we can avoid it.
But we heard you loud and clear on the extra time. We're confirming you have time.
You just want one Christmas, right?
I don't think I'm getting a Christmas tree or New Year's for that matter. But also, so talking more about resources, because we know this is complex. We've heard papers being thrown around as being a scary thing. And in fact, it is a big text amount. We are taking all of the uses, hundreds and hundreds of uses, and we are changing cross-references to tens of thousands of places where those uses are in our zoning resolution. That generates a lot of pages. Furthermore, we're reorganizing sections into more coherent fashion so that in the future, all of your BSA permits for a particular use group are now with that particular use group. So in the use group reorganization, we are generating hundreds and hundreds of pages based on that change alone. All of these are annotated, all of these are provided for you, and we have additional resources to make sure that where there are zoning changes, you know exactly where to find those in the documents. But we're also creating, I've shared with you, we know that this is a big proposal and that you may want to weigh in on some of the individual components. Let's say you like proposals 3, 5, and 7. You have reservations about a couple of them, and you want us to make some changes. And there's maybe 1 or 2 that you say, absolutely no way, not for these reasons. We want that feedback, and we've provided an optional worksheet for you all that's meant kind of like an attachment to whatever process you would normally have. So you'd have a resolution, and then to include it in your land use participant portal, if you'd like, your feedback on this worksheet or in something similar. But essentially, we want as much detailed feedback as we can and your viewpoints on each of the 18 proposals within this initiative. Does not have to be a formal vote. You can choose to do that if you wish, but we think of this as an additional resource to help you through the process. Other things that are on our website available for everyone. So we have existing conditions, economic snapshots are Our teams have been hard at work looking at both the jobs as well as the storefront makeup of each community district in the city. As we go out, we present to community boards. We're sharing slides specific to yours. Tammy, I took the liberty of pulling CB1 from Mondays. And this is available on our website in its entirety for all 59 districts. If you have questions about the data, happy to respond and share with you all. The jobs data comes from the State Department of Labor, and the storefront data comes from Live XYZ, which is a company that is contracted with the city to provide a comprehensive look at over 150,000 storefront spaces across our city. Detailed proposal presentations. I am on slide, I think 16, but there's about 50 slides in this presentation for you all to look through. It's essentially duplicative information to this second link here, which is on our website, but you can share that URL around as well. The annotated zoning text is on our website, as well as 2 documents that we're calling translations, where we take each of the current uses and use groups, and we tell you exactly what use and use group those will fall into in the future framework. So any questions that you might have around that, again, happy to answer. It's on our website. Additional resources that are not on our website, we have community board specific presentations with applicability maps we've been making for each and every community board as we're going to present to them, and are being made available after those meetings. As I mentioned, the economic snapshot slides, and then summaries of changes as part of those presentations that are affecting any special purpose districts. As I mentioned, there's a couple of places in the proposal where we're trying to enhance the nature of these districts when it comes to streetscape and make sure that there's greater consistency between the underlying zoning and the districts when it comes to the antiquated use framework that we have. And then technical support. If you want a guide, we have it of each of the precise sections of the zoning resolution for each of the proposals. We also have things like a pocket guide that can explain in plain language the proposal overall, the initiative, as well as some more topic specific one-pagers. And then for anything else, please reach out. We're available through our borough offices, and we're available for meetings. Yeah. With that, I think I'm done. Tried to go through as quickly as I could, but happy to answer any questions.
Okay, can you just go ahead 1 second, Russell? Can you stop share just in case anybody has a question via Zoom, and then Russell, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a process question. So when we share feedback, what's how does that get incorporated? Like, what's the sort of timeline for that? When you guys get a bunch of feedback that says, no on 2, this changed to 3, whatever, then how does that get implemented? And does it get back to us, or what's the sort of?
Yeah. So similar to other actions that we would have as an agency, you all would provide recommendations to us, and those would be taken into consideration with the CPC when they vote on the proposal. What I will say is that we're taking your recommendations very seriously. Part of the reason we had the worksheet created for the proposal is we want detailed feedback. We want you to say yes or no because, but also if you want us to make a particular change to a particular proposal, please note it in as much detail as you can, because that helps us understand the nature of the change that you're seeking to make with the proposals, and really does help us better be responsive to what you're suggesting.
So the CPC can make changes before they pass it on to the next to the council.
Precisely.
Just a more narrow question, but my understanding has always been that the prohibition against certain uses in NYCHA facilities was essentially part of federal law. How, when you're talking here about sort of city planning as the approval mechanism, how does that all work out?
Yeah, it's a great question. So federal law supersedes. So if zoning would allow for, let's say, many NYCHA campuses might have a ground floor space that today they're using as storage or offices for NYCHA workers. And what we've heard is that in some cases, they'd like to convert it for use by residents, for maybe some sort of entrepreneurial space or something like that. Center for an Urban Future actually had a great report on this about a year back, where they were looking at the need for for shared commercial kitchen space, in particular for food and tech entrepreneurs at NYCHA. And so this proposal is crafted to be flexible for NYCHA, but also other large-scale residence sites where it would allow for space either within existing footprint or not, and it would allow for the ability for a limited amount of space. But it's not meant to contradict or supersede federal regulations that may prohibit any kind of business activity within the residences themselves or on the campuses generally.
It's probably worth noting there's a lot of different conditions in NYCHA campuses today. Some that do already have commercial space, and this issue is not a problem. We have some that have commercial space, but it's non-conforming. It's residentially zoned, but the space goes back to the 1940s. We have some that have space that looks like it could be commercial, right? That has maybe a podium, but it's being used for storage. We've had requests from NYCHA in the past to try and find a solution for this. It's quite challenging because the solution we really have under zoning today would be a full commercial rezoning of a NYCHA property, which might be inappropriate in other ways, right? So this is a much more targeted solution. So we know there's interest from NYCHA, certainly from NYCHA residents as well.
Xavier.
Couple things, observation. The overly needing of revision. Thank you, Robert Moses. The very good. Looking at both the slides and also knowing what's going on with a lot of lobbying groups that with the Open Streets program, what we're going to do, just seeing the slides that's represented there, what is being adopted, because I know that not all Open Streets have been successful. Are those provisions going to be explained? And so could you give a little light on that, on the revision process?
Sure. And I think you're talking about the streetscape proposal in particular. Okay.
Yeah, because that's where it would fall under with DOT's work.
Yeah. So we regulate everything within the zoning lot. So essentially building facade on in. There's a couple of exceptions for things like a curb cut. But DOT is everything else. So when it comes to open streets, this proposal doesn't do anything about an open street, one way or the other. But what it does recognize in the streetscape proposal we have is that a business or a building, in a sense, has a responsibility to the vibrancy of its surroundings, and that the individual actions of a business have the ability for good or ill to impact the surrounding activation of other businesses, the economic activity that occurs, the feelings of safety for residents that pass by. And so the streetscape regulations, in the lowest or most simple and least onerous way possible, try to curb the worst outcomes. So for example, you might be walking along a street and then suddenly you have a long brick wall for 100 feet because the business decided, I don't need a storefront space. I don't need to create windows. I'm just going to brick it up. We see this with, for example, chain pharmacies or banks. And so the proposal says, if you're going to have a blank wall, you have to do something to activate it somehow. That might be a mural, that might be plantings, that might be design. Ideally, it's some form of transparency. So if that business becomes something that would want windows in the future, it can just use it. So we're thinking towards the future in the adaptability of these spaces and trying to curb what we consider to be some of the most detrimental effects that an individual business can make on the surroundings, not just of that street, but the whole neighborhood. So I hope that answers your question in a roundabout way.
Kind of.
Okay.
I think it's more looking at the activation space, the expansion out from the envelope that we've seen as we went through the pandemic, and what that's going to be incorporated into in conjunction with DOT's pursuits. So I think it's looking at how they're going to intersect.
I think DOT and DCP talk a lot about this intersection between what happens within the zoning lot, what happens on the sidewalk, and then what happens in the street space. So the tools are different, but there's an agency to agency conversation to make sure they're aligned. And I think, to Matt's point, like the last thing you would want to see on an open street for its success is somebody putting a big blank wall, that disrupts that activation, or worse, a parking garage, right? Like something that actually required car movements to come through the open street space, right? So in that sense, these are quite well aligned. there's no exact science right now to and probably ever to where an open street opens. But the logic behind where we are applying these streetscape regulations on higher pedestrian oriented streets, particularly in what we call the transit zone, right? Manhattan and sort of the inner core of the city. And then we've been much more flexible about the regulations in outer Queens or Southern Brooklyn, for instance. That orients quite well with the logic of the DOT streets plan and the way they're categorizing streets. So it's not the same thing. They're very different tools, but the conceptual alignment of sort of protecting the activity of our sort of commercial main streets are being thought of in concert.
Yeah. The one thing I would add on to that is that to a remarkable degree in reviewing the regulations that existed to this point, streetscape was not part of the 61 resolution for the most part, and it was kind of adopted over time, either through special districts or through one-off actions that the agency made. And as a result, you might have designated streets within a particular special district that have pretty good streetscape regulations and curb some of the outcomes we were describing. And then you walk a block over, it's not a designated street and there's nothing. And part of what we're trying to do in this proposal is raise the bar, frankly, for the streets that are not already covered under these regulations, and make sure that we're giving them the treatment that they need in order to ensure that the walkable and active frontages are maintained while having conflicts reduced. So it's a complicated proposal, one that we have a few slides in the appendix here for you all to take a look at some of the details, but we're happy to follow up and talk more about it.
You could share that if we could.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I see Tammy had a question, that Layla had a question first, then we'll go to Tammy, and then I want to move ahead and just talk a little bit about what Borough Board is going to be doing in terms of our plan moving forward. So go ahead, Layla and Tammy, and then
thank you. Can you actually speak to the zoning change for gaming facilities? Are casinos going to be permitted through this text, or is the zoning text amendment going to come? My understanding is that it's not in this.
It is not in this.
Amusements does not encompass
Casinos.
Yes. It explicitly does not encompass casinos. Casinos are not part of this proposal and not part of what you need to consider at this point. Amusements includes a wide range of experiential business types, things that range from, came up in Manhattan CB1 on Monday, axe throwing, to something perhaps a little bit more benign, like an escape room.
Yeah.
And in many cases, the zoning, by nature of being unclear, restricts these business types from locating in commercial districts. Some can find a loophole. They can say they're accessory to a bar, or yeah. So that's what the amusements proposal is about. No casinos as part of this.
Open dining has been one of the largest transformations of the streetscape that the city has seen in decades. Rulemaking is currently in process. I have some concerns about the connection between where this zoning proposal goes and how open dining fits in. There are many locations that are not necessarily okay with open dining based on clear path requirements and what DOT has determined of street corridors, primary, secondary, etc. And I'm looking at your streetscape and the usage and the new corner activations and other things like that. A corner activation for could also be a restaurant, which is then allowed to have two sides of frontage of sidewalk as permanent, because sidewalk is no longer seasonal seating, as well as roadway. So I would like to hear an understanding of how the new existing legislation for that interacted with this dialogue here for a zoning change, because the two are extraordinarily impactful, where you're looking at a street that maybe did not have a corner commercial, but has commercial and restaurants down the rest of it. You're now allowing the viability for the corner. We know from SLA, they will not deny an application if it was a supermarket and now becomes an experiential amusement with the bar. They don't care what the last use was. They only care what is in front of them. They are not looking at a public benefit usage, that's not in their purview, that's the city's purview, they told us. So I have some concerns that where we're going, and I'd like it to be addressed with the open dining, with amusement, with everything else. Trust me, I'm a food and beverage person, I love being out and about in New York City, but at some point, if we lose all the dry cleaners, all the services that support the community, because it is so commercially friendly, and now you've opened up the road everywhere, where are the guide rails for quality of life and for public benefit that ensure that we are not losing the services that residents need?
Thank you for that. I think, at least on the DOT rulemaking portion, I'd like to follow up with you and look into it further about any interaction between the two. And Carolyn worked very closely with DOT in the open restaurants process. So I'm not sure if there's anything you'd want to add on that.
Sure. So just as a point of fact, DCP is working with DOT. We did review the rules that we are serving on a working group that was required under the council legislation. I just want to make sure I understand. This is really about the corner store proposal or
Corner, streetscape, every place that you're allowing to turn from residential to commercial.
So let me take each of them because I just want to make sure I understand the specifics. So the corner store proposal here, start with this is a discretionary action, right? So what this proposal allows is in a residence district, right, where commercial otherwise would not be allowed, for somebody to apply to the city planning commission to create a store of up to 2,500 square feet. In order to do that, you would have to complete an environmental review that looked at traffic concerns, any other environmental concerns. You've got to basically do an EAS to create your store. It would come in front of the community board for discretionary review, and the city planning commission could decide whether to allow a store at that location. It is true that a restaurant could be an applicant for that discretionary approval. And it's a good point that the environmental review, if you were looking at a restaurant at that location and you were thinking about your reasonable worst case scenario, should probably consider whether that restaurant could have a sidewalk cafe in front of it at that moment, right? Now, obviously, if under that discretionary circumstance, there were issues raised with the traffic or the pedestrian flow, those would all be part of the discretionary consideration for citing that store in the first place. But it would have a second discretionary review to actually get a sidewalk cafe or roadway cafe through that process. So there are a number of hurdles and multiple community board reviews and city agency reviews involved in that discretionary action. There are not, I would love to understand particularly lower Manhattan, like if there are particular geographies that you're concerned about for that. When we have admittedly thought about the corner store proposal, we're thinking a lot more about places like Outer Queens that have vast swaths of residential zones where there's no commercial nearby, where you might want to put once in a blue moon a store in an otherwise non-commercial location versus our areas of the city where we admittedly already have a lot of as of right commercial. So the idea that somebody would go through that sort of hurdle to make a small change, we think it's far, far more likely that people will avail themselves of as of right commercial locations in a place where those are readily available. Now, the streetscape is not doing anything to allow new commercial uses. It's actually it's shaping the presence of commercial uses, but there's nothing in those regs that sort of force. I mean, they're limiting the size of lobbies and sort of shaping your building frontage in a different way. But I'm not sure
if you limit the size of lobbies and there's commercial on either side, that avails the opportunity for open dining, exterior to be increased as well. So it's not just a streetscape in terms of what you're talking about on the interior, there's a cascading effect that happens on the exterior.
Sure. Okay, so what you're saying is that even though the commercial is already allowed, and even though somebody could put a restaurant there, by virtue of saying your lobby can't be 100 feet, we're actually encouraging an additional restaurant. That's the concern.
It's not, I mean, I'm not worried about encouraging additional restaurants. It's about what happens on the sidewalk and the roadbed that's in conjunction with that. So whether, the minimizing of clear path and the additional opportunities for roadbed dining increasing in size. So it becomes a point that you have roadbed, narrow way to get into a building, right? Even though there's 3 feet in between supposedly each roadbed, you have to put your garbage can somewhere, which will be in that 3 feet in between each roadbed. So it's a cascading effect from inside to outside that I question whether was considered. And then obviously there's no change in anything having to do with anything for 2 of our greatest public health crises in New York City, public bathrooms and affordable housing. And I know affordable housing will come, but there's nothing in here that does anything to cure.
Crazy
guy.
That's true. Certainly, as you point out, but to reemphasize, we are very, very committed to finding opportunities for affordable housing, and our colleagues at DCP will be back in front of the board shortly talking about some of those proposals. This one is really only touching on it in very limited ways, in the sense that we are allowing for conversions a little bit more flexibly by allowing the relationship of residential and commercial to work more flexibly, right? So these particularly large office buildings, we know there's this challenge where, like, if I'm an office on the 31st floor, I actually can't convert anything below that without kicking the offices out, right? So there are a few little pieces in here, but in general, that's true. This is not a housing proposal. It's also not a public bathroom proposal, though I myself would certainly support that. The clear paths have gotten larger and not smaller in the rules. So, but I won't speak for DOT on the.
I mean, the permitted, I'm sorry, it's about accessibility, access, friendly, making sure our streetscape is actually friendly. And I see the addition of potentially where we're going as adding additional obstacles in both of those and making it less actually friendly for pedestrians. And I come from CD1, so most of my streets are not technically wide enough for most.
Yeah, I would say that. I know we don't have a lot of time.
I'm sorry.
Happy to follow up and understand a little bit more in detail.
So I want to try to just emphasize that I believe CCP is going to every single community board. I think that the space for specific input on each community board should be left at the community board level in your all capable hands. And I'm going to ask you all to try to figure out when that presentation hasn't come for your board yet. You should calendar that ASAP, please. I also ask that on behalf of my staff and our team who's going to be going to your meetings too, to watch that. We just want to make sure that we have it all in our calendars and are able to attend all of those meetings. Obviously we're not taking a vote on this today. And just like we did for carbon, thank you. We're gonna monitor where the boards are with their votes on this. Before we had heard the news about the January piece, we thought this was gonna happen in December. Now I think I'm not gonna tell you when until we see when the boards are actually doing this vote. When we hit, just like we've done for every other topic, when I see that the majority of boards have had the opportunity to weigh in on this, and we'll figure out when our borough board vote is going to be. But I really would encourage you to calendar the presentation if you haven't already, so that everybody has a good enough time, a good enough amount of time to really let this marinate. I'm just also going to ask you to please consider voting on these individually, because unless something dramatically changes on our end, we are going to vote on this individually. So all 18, we're going to take on a one-by-one basis. Because clearly, even as you can tell in the conversations here, there are some that people have a little bit more questions about, a little more maybe a little more hesitancy on, or wherever, and some that I think are going to be, I think, like kind of no-brainers in some cases. So we're going to take these individually. I encourage you to do the same for your boards. If you don't, that's fine. It's up to you. But then I'm still going to ask chairs to be prepared to vote on this, and we'll just keep you posted. I thought this was going to happen in December. I think it'll just depend on when our boards hit that number. Whatever a majority of boards have been able to hear this. Does anybody have any questions about process here?
Can we do the vote in February? I mean, I think that's a question for DCP. if all boards have till the end of January or the first week in February as some need, would it be possible to do the borough president's vote for our February meeting?
I think it would completely depend on when the boards are doing their stuff. I mean, I normally, when we did Carbon, it was really just when we hit the, like, we were watching every single day. We were talking about this every day to see like where the boards were doing this. So I think I'll have to get back to you and see when that is. I've always been of the opinion, this is me, not Mark Levine, but I've always been of the opinion that I want to make sure that we're at the table, so to speak, and that we're not sending in a recommendation or sending in something that's so late in the game that it's not as well considered, that our word isn't there. I know that they're there, but like I want to make sure that like to the best of our ability, if we all have the opportunity to chew this over, if our board members are, I mean, it's the reason why we're doing this now, if everybody has the opportunity to really consider these things, and I don't want to delay at the very end just to get it in the last. I'd like to be in hand to put our comments in early and to have a seat at the table is Ms. Tricia's opinion there. So, but that being said, I'm not going to do anything until I see how the boards are really considering this. So keep us posted. If you have any questions about process, let us know. I think the best I like the worksheet piece for what it's worth. It's again, I commend you guys. I like the worksheet piece. I like the idea of district specific comments on this. And I appreciate that the DCP is going to every board with the district specific data on this piece. So if anybody has any questions, let us know. You can expect to see our team on your meetings to watching this closely, getting in notes, and then we'll take this piece by piece, 18 rounds, as soon as everybody else does the same. Okay. Okay, thanks, guys.
Well, thank you all for the opportunity to speak tonight. One other thing I would add is that we've had requests to at least from a few community boards to meet not just with the land use committee, but also with the economic development committee or the small business committee. We welcome that. What we would say is to make things a little bit easier for us capacity wise. If you could hold them concurrently, we would be very appreciative. We know that calendars don't always work out to make that possible, but we're trying to be able to staff as many meetings as we possibly can and get you the answers you can in the room rather than having a back and forth over the weeks afterwards. So in order to facilitate that timely process, we're happy to meet with multiple subcommittees if you want, and we welcome it. We would just ask to try and consolidate as much as we can. But thank you.
Thanks, guys. Okay, we're gonna move right along. Xavier's gotta go. A lot of people have got work and other things on. I understand, but Xavier, go ahead with your.
So thank you for everyone's patience. I hope you're doing well. I want to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. Hopefully you get away with the family and friends or Friendsgiving. I just came off from Somos conference down in Puerto Rico. It was really successful in going off onto the OCM conversations. I met some of the people who actually are working at OCM, and we're setting up a call to have a dialogue. A lot of the feedback has been about the review process and why they did not take the modeling from SLA and just apply it and put it right on top. It was a working model. And we obviously know with the enforcement mechanism, I was invited to a dinner and Sheriff Miranda was there. And he said that if there are any issues that are popping up because they're the enforcement mechanism in this case, to let them know so that they can take action on those shops that are illegal and selling. We have a couple. There's the fun house. It's a blue bus that's right next to Costco, and they give away pot. And they ask for a donation, which is also illegal. And they got pulled into the 25th precinct. Our commanding officer Mason Ned.
Just ridiculous.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And they told him, like, you can't be doing this. It's illegal. And if it's going to be an issue, we're going to have an issue with you. The bus is still there. They haven't seen any activity per se. Sheriff Miranda was very direct with me. I have his personal cell phone that if there are issues that are popping up so that they can start building the case, because what we are about is economic viability of all of our businesses, including these new ones, but everyone's on the same page that the legislation needs to be adjusted at the state and city level for enforcement mechanisms on the local level. And again, the runway to actually take action is way too long. So again, I will be having a meeting with the OCM, and to echo the points from Tammy, last year we said, listen, do the 60-day period, put up the same criteria. It's really simple. Again, trying to assemble a plane mid-flight while serving drinks, it's nonsensical. If I ran a business or any of us did, it would fail. But anyway, so that's the update. Other thing, obviously you saw the comptroller's report on the oversaturation and especially in East Harlem and other parts. We've been talking about this for nearly 2 years, and we were glad to see that report. We will be having a discussion at executive, which is tonight, under our new business. We did not have the meeting with the District Attorney of New York office with their data. We requested to have collated, and when it comes to prosecutions for possession and for predominantly distribution. Andy Wershauer was very open, vocal about the fact that discovery reform ties their hands, so they're focusing on the more violent crimes, and they just don't have, even at full staffing, the ability to get to everything. So what they do is they take the most egregious, if they have multiple offenses from one individual, and they go to the one major offense. The bigger issue, though, is that they are seeing that area in 125th Street, 126th, that instead of being right across from the OPC, they've now moved around the block or in other areas. But we're gonna meet after Thanksgiving to have a full discussion of the data. But they said that there's a way to be vocal in messaging about the saturation and about finding a way to alleviate the problem, so we can generate, one, public safety, and two, economic revitalization of that corridor. The last bit, we did meet with some members of the governor's office, and they are looking at possibilities on how we can reassess the locations. That's all they could commit to. So that's all there is at that point. We have, other than that, we had our presentation to the city of Yes. I'm going to hopefully have them come back in December. They've already put that meeting. So that's in general my report. If you'd be so kind, if you have something written to email, I'd love to read it, participate. I'm sorry, I have to go to another appointment. Any questions?
Thank you.
Quick question. Do you have in your district a map of supportive housing, drug injection sites, or anything like that?
We do have a yes.
Okay.
And I did get those breakdowns, and some of that it took a while to collect. And again, we do have good partners in this, and we have other partners who are not traditionally leading, and those that are being good partners and putting the whole community step of healing to cover. Each of us has been in. So we can share that out.
Thanks, no, we're gonna go to Kathy at CB12. Heads, just letting you know that Carmen Delrosa's office is here. Carly Rivera's office is here. Gail Brewer's office is here. Just wanted to thank you guys for being here as well. Go ahead, Kathy. No, you're not Kathy. Me? I'm sorry. I didn't know this one. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. If I can stay a little longer. So. Right now. My name's Andrea. I'm the vice chair.
You're from CB10.
No, CB3.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I was waving at you thinking like, why is Kathy waving at me back? Entire time.
I know, I thought it was someone.
No. Okay, so if Kathy's not here, then we're gonna move on to CB1. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Thank you.
No worries. Thanks, everybody. I'm gonna be somewhat concise. We have construction resiliency projects starting. So if you're riding a bike in Lower Manhattan, really be careful as you come around the bottom here. It's that Ferry and Battery. The entire bikeway and both sides of the street are under construction. Right around Battery Place and go over to hit the Greenway. So for anybody who's riding a bike and coming downtown, please heads up and be careful. Which brings me to the resiliency projects in Lower Manhattan. As you know, we're 3/4 of our space is water and land, and much of it is now under construction. The Battery Park City Authority is holding 2 updates for their plans, which go from North Moore Street all the way down to the Battery, which transforms the coastline. First one will be November 20th for the northern part, and that'll be done at the CB1. We hope that'll be there at the November 20th Environmental Protection Committee. Secondarily, they are hosting their own event on November 30th details and flyers you can find from CB1. I'm happy to share all of that if you're interested. Cannabis, we have applications to be heard tonight. It's a little bit more than Wild West these days in terms of what's going on and what's happening and the legal arguments that we hear and the responses. So I'm not really sure. I'm just going to leave that where it is. It's there's not enough drinks that you can serve while flying that plane to make anybody happy on the plane.
That's how you serve joints, Tammy.
We had
I can tell you the best places to buy.
there are lots of stressful issues around this. Okay, we had a great presentation from Hornblower on the new ferry contract and service that has come out. I'm super excited to see that the amount of public dollars that subsidies is looking to be decreased because it is the highest subsidized form of transportation in New York City. And the numbers look like they will come down and still highly subsidized, but it has a good plan. So super excited to see that. The only thing that would have made Community Board 1 even happier is electric boats and the move from diesel, but we'll hopefully in another 10 years, the city will get there. But that puts me to the press event that was this week with electric helicopters at Pier 6, which are quieter. Really awesome, super excited until I also realized that that's an additional use, not a full replacement use. So we are still excited about the sourcing of green infrastructure, the opportunity for lower emissions, potentially rolling that out onto the west side where Jeffrey is and things like that. But yeah, there's that. Our Performing Arts Center at the World Trade Center campus is open. The restaurant is also open. I highly recommend, please come enjoy the Jewel of Lower Manhattan. It's a completely different experience than any of the other performing arts centers and something that I welcome everybody to come. If you want to come and have a cup of coffee and meet, anybody down there, I'm happy to be there any day that you'd like. We have heard from the borough-based jail system that in the controller's report and others, that it is impossible to close Rikers and utilize the current plan for the BBJ system. As people probably know, CB1, which impacts CB2 and 3, will be the location of a new mega jail. And while the city in the beginning in the sales pitch said it's not going to be as large as what was allowed by right, because we're working on social justice and this is going to be awesome. We're really reducing the bed count. Well, there's been a significant increase in the bed count. There's absolutely no possible way. Even the mayor has said he won't change the laws, but he understands that this isn't going to work. There is a design forum that is being held on November 29th in Chinatown. And so, yeah. It's just a bit of a mess. Again, this does feel like building the plane while you're flying it and serving drinks. So I would like to say that the state and the city have a nice alignment on that type of a thing. The rule changes. We passed a resolution asking for tolling of anything that comes out while the boards were off because it denies our ability to do our charter mandate role. And I think that should apply with, and we spoke about this in our committees, with rule changes. The impacts of the DOT rule change creation that was done by legislature is the most impactful on community boards that then have to deal with any of the issues that come for quality of life complaints and everything else. And these are significant changes, and changes that are not reflected back in, for example, sidewalk cafes are now permanent, but sidewalk cafes have never been included in the DOB code for bathrooms because anything outside the restaurant was considered seasonal. Seasonal used to be 3 months, potentially 4 months in the summer and spring, and now the outdoor road day time is 8 months. And the DOB building fixtures had looked at seasonal, so seasonal was not the majority of the year. So we think that with all of this, a rule change should not be a 30-day review period. It should be the same review period that the community board has for everything else. So I just can't say enough on that one. And we did have our presentation from DCP this week. To say that everybody on our board thought it was overwhelming would be a real understatement. And while I encourage everybody to see how it impacts on their own community. Also take into consideration what your neighbors' communities are, because although we look at our own, where it's. If you live in CB1, you might be living in 2, 3, 4 if you want to be downtown somewhere. And what we want to do is make sure that the quality of life for everyone, people who live here, people who work here, and the people who come visit is tenable. And there are some things that we thought on the 18 proposals that significantly changed what our district would end up looking like. So that is where I close.
Thanks, Tammy. CB two.
I will pick up, I will pick up where on that same topic, we too had our presentation. And one overarching takeaway was that this feels like it is, and it's clearly designed for the city as a whole. It is not addressing serious concerns about life in District 2 or down, or even in Manhattan as a whole. Just the way it's true that there are many aspects of zoning that are out of date. What's also not being addressed is what's also out of date is the reality of how people are living. What being residential means today. The fact is that most of our people live in what is functionally a mixed use environment, whether or not it is actually designated as such. And some of these proposals really there's a lot of opportunity to harm people in their homes. For example, the idea of putting businesses into spaces above residences, not necessarily automatically a bad idea. It introduces concerns about safety, concerns about access that are not really addressed when you're looking at the nature of our streetscape, of our buildings. It doesn't, of course, also address the reality that so much of our housing stock, all of our buildings are a century or more old, and they don't have the kind of features that make it viable to do some of these things. It's just there's like so many proposals. The devil is in the details. They're not dealing with the specifics of how our streets are laid out and what our buildings how they actually function. So it's really is a challenge in terms of breaking this one down, and hopefully they will listen to, who we are as distinct from the city as a whole. We're not separate residential from commercial. We are it's all mass use. The biggest category of businesses that have emerged without a doubt are things involving eating and drinking. And there is a super saturation, and that concept, it rolls over from when you're encouraging new businesses, most likely that is what you're encouraging. That rolls over again into the outdoor, the activation of outdoor spaces. Again, those are going to be mostly about eating and drinking. We have been facing, for a long time now, saturation with regards to liquor licenses. That's why CB2 has 2 standing SLA committees. The first one, they heard 13 out of 22 applications. They actually heard 13 applications for licenses. The second one, out of 14 notices, heard 7. These, you can't separate the growth of that segment of the economy from the desire to activate the streetscape, from the activation, the encouragement of more business. These things all fit together. And we're just concerned that because these are being overseen by different agencies and different tiers of government, that they're not being looked at together, which in our district is absolutely critical, because people are feeling like they have nowhere to go, that they're prisoners in their own homes increasingly. This was I attended 2 meetings with the relatively new liquor authority chairperson to discuss these things. The first one involved boards 1, 2, and 3. The second one was with just CB2 and various local community groups, and trying to find ways to point out that that is by far the biggest source of growth. And well, to bring it back to the City of Yes proposal, the contraction of the different categories of business can go too far. Just the way we do need modernization, the idea that you're not recognizing the unique qualities of something like eating and drinking, which doesn't occur at the same time of day that other businesses occur, that brings in that depends on volumes of patrons that other businesses don't, is another, it's a dimension that, we face in extreme. Saturation to go.
Respectfully, can we not have comments on City of Yes during chair reports?
We need to really
like,
move these along.
It's not
We
about-
are at an hour and
You guys
25
pass a
minutes of this
resolution
meeting.
to have your views on it, but to have sort of just extended commentary on your views on the proposal now, I'd like to appreciate your concerns that you have.
I was provided feedback that was based on what I received at our admins. But I will move on. We had, again, our cannabis committee, we received 77 notices. Ultimately, we only received 88 complete applications that were heard. It's not clear how many will ultimately flow through. Fortunately, we're seeing that difference between the large numbers of initial interest versus people following through. But again, there isn't any so clear guidance. One thing I want to say, this month we are going to be running, which is actually today, we're going to revert back to running full board as in-person only. We've been having a lot of troubles with the technical aspects of running a hybrid. It has been very hard to make, while we're running it as a test, it is very hard to make that decision because we know that we may be asking people who would otherwise participate, we're asking them to forego an opportunity to participate, and that includes people with disabilities. But at this point, it's not clear that we really have an option. And it's kind of disheartening that each board is go it alone in terms of developing some sort of protocol, putting together technology. There really needs to be, I think, a uniform response from boards as a whole in terms of how we proceed forward, or at least some guidance in the sense of, can we expect that this law is going to sunset and that we don't have to deal with it going forward? So whatever it is, however this moves forward, it would really help if we had some clearer answers. So with that, I will end.
Okay, thanks. CB3. Sure. So hi everyone, my name is Andrea Revio. You probably all don't know me. I'm the first vice chair and the incoming chair, so I'll be seeing more. I'll keep it super brief. But maybe I'll give you a little bit more context because I think maybe my predecessor hasn't been here in a little bit. Just to like briefly touch upon our kind of process with the City of Yes text amendments. We have an excellent land use chair, and we've been on top of this for the past couple of months. Very happy to hear that we'll have until February to vote on everything. So we'll continue this into next month and the next after that. We had a consultant come and speak to us. I don't know, George James, if he's been speaking to you all as well. So that's, I'll just keep that super brief there. We are similarly with CB1 and CB2 have a lot of burdensome processes to deal with the OCM and our cannabis task force. I sit on that task force as well, so I was kind of able to see sort of the operational side of it and share similar concerns again with particularly handling public process around this. A lot of folks have a lot of confusion, try to come there thinking that they can do something about the illegal cannabis shops and all that. So it's been a challenge, but it's also something we want to kind of digest in an executive committee of how we want to move forward with the criteria for how to make recommendations and all of that. But again, also it's been pretty similar to SLA as well from my observations. And let's see, we have a big agenda item on transportation about the Grand Street Clinton redesign. I'm sure you've all have maybe heard of it. It's been somewhat contentious over the past months. So we plan to hear that a new plan next month. We're like changing our executive committee a lot. So I'm still getting my bearings and our committee will be too. So I think that's about it. We also went to the ribbon cutting for the Union Square Tech Hub, which is now open. And that was supported by CB3 for many, many years. We were pretty instrumental in our, advocating for it in our district needs for a long time. And like I said, very supportive of the project. I think I'll just keep it at that, and hopefully next month I'll give you all some more fine-tuned stuff on all of our committees. Okay, so
Thanks, Trisha. Hi, everybody. A couple of things. I want to give a shout out to CB6 and also to the CB4 will be joining the call for universal daylighting on all intersections in New York City. This is a life-saving thing that we should be doing. It's also a law that we ignore. So I hope everybody considers taking up daylighting at our intersections, given the number of crossing guards that have been killed literally in the past month alone, which is two, too many. We are co-sponsoring our annual coat drive with Metro Baptist Church. We've raised $20,000 as well as are looking to receive tons of coats, hats, new gloves for families specific to migrant shelters. So we are doing receiving this Saturday at Metro Baptist Church, which is on 48th and 9th, and then families will be welcome later in the afternoon to come by and pick out things to have a warm coat this winter. This is in its fourth year, and we love doing this. We are looking forward to receiving the draft environmental impact statement regarding the Port Authority bus terminal redesign, which is going to be a significant undertaking that will kick off next year. It will then be followed by a ULURP, and that we are actually a federal agency partner on this project, so have a very good working relationship with the port on that, and are looking forward to sort of seeing how that's realized. We also are awaiting scoping documents for the Chelsea NYCHA campuses, which is sort of a step one as it relates to the EIS for the proposed redevelopment of those. And then finally, just a flag as we move forward, as Albany begins to think about going into session in January. 421A has expired. CB4 has the most 421A units in the city of New York. We stand to lose 7,000 units under the 421A program in the next 6 years alone if there's not a replacement. We also know that that type of housing is not getting built right now because that subsidy doesn't exist. And so it is really important that in the push for housing, affordable housing, we encourage our colleagues in Albany to think about what a 421A replacement looks like and sort of fix the loopholes to address the huge loss that's also going to come if that's not as well. So always want to cap off with a housing comment from CB4. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy Thanksgiving.
Hi. So Vicky Barbera sent her regrets. She had knee replacement surgery and she's recovering. Wishing her a speedy recovery. Moving to be very brief, Community Board 5 received 72 cannabis dispensary applications. Same issue as what has been shared by my colleagues of other community boards. CB5 has actually adopted criteria on what makes a cannabis application eligible. So the board was basically able to sort those applications, and that's basically the extent of the comments that the board chose to make on those applications. So it was not really weighing in on the merits of the applications, which I think right now is just unfeasible, given that we have so much uncertainty. So we were able to just, to sort what is compliant with CB5's rules and not. We had a liquor license application that was rather controversial. This involves Limelight. Yes, Limelight is coming back online, this time with a legitimate Broadway theater. There was a lot of discussion around, how a Broadway theater can actually operate in an area that is not really, designed for that, with a very narrow 6th Avenue frontage with all sorts of bus stop and grills on the sidewalk, and a side street on 20th Street that is also very narrow. So that produced quite a bit of discussion. And we also had an interesting landmarks application for building the Lady Plant Historic District that also generated quite a bit of discussion. Otherwise, I will let Vicky bring the Borough Board up to speed on other matters. One thing that I will mention is that on Sunday, Amtrak and Vornado are inaugurating a new escalator on 7th Avenue that will bring passengers into Penn Station. This is much needed, and it's always great to see improvements, as modest as they are. That it is really a game changer to have this additional elevator that will actually serve mostly the New Jersey Transit passengers. It is on 7th Avenue towards 31st Street. So I'm glad to report that. That's it.
Some group of investments going to be there. It's not a small community, elevators and stuff.
It's amazing. It's really amazing.
So very similar about cannabis. Very disappointed that OCM canceled today. I'm sure they have legitimate reasons, but it's just not a good look with everything that's going on. I know they are attending tomorrow the district cabinet meetings. They're not doing that anymore. Good. Okay, even worse look. But yeah, we have a lot of questions. Overall, fortunately, CB6 isn't as inundated with applications as many of you are. But we do see a lot of issues, particularly that there are factions within the community and the board as well that are using the confusion with OCM to kind of circumvent the legalization of cannabis, to prevent cannabis legal dispensaries from opening up. One particular issue of confusion is the 500-foot rule, about whether that is like walking door to door, or is that literally a radius through buildings to get to others, because in at least our district, if that rule were to be applied, just generally 500 feet, there would be no place to put a legal cannabis dispensary, even though there are liquor stores and bars and things of that nature that fit either of those rules. So that's a point of consternation for a lot of people. As Jeffrey mentioned, we passed a resolution on daylighting, which we're very proud of. Definitely can be something that we can all work on together. That is definitely a public safety issue, and something that can be brought borough-wide as well. Third thing is we also passed a resolution in support of Alexander Boris's bill about virtual meetings and making an exception for community boards in a city of over 1 million people. I know it scares some people to hear about virtual meetings, but the bill itself is not about forcing any board to do one method of operation. It just gives every board the option to self-determine what works best for them. So if you want to meet completely in person, you can do that. But for boards that do want to meet in a hybrid model that doesn't have all these weird requirements of making board chairs decide what's an extenuating circumstance or not, it gets rid of things like that and allows for true hybrid. It also allows for full virtual as well. Our board in particular has been struggling mightily with finding physical space in the district. As we all know, community boards are severely under-resourced. So it gets rid of that option. We also find it awkward that we often ask institutions, organization, entities for space that may have business in front of our board, which can bring up for awkward situations as well. So giving us that option, I think it's a wonderful thing. We supported it. And I would love for it to be at borough board so that we can have a unified position on that and allow every board to self-determine and have the power to self-determine what works best for them. So it actually allows for all of the options that we've been discussing here to do that. And then last but not least, Tricia mentioned, I'm term limited at the end of this year. We just had our board elections. So I'll bring our new board officers to next month's meeting, the new chair and the first vice chair as well. It has been a pleasure to work with all of you. We've done a lot of great work in the last 3 years. Most of us were elected during pandemic and we didn't know what the hell we were doing. But we all successfully led our boards out of that darkness into some really productive conversations and positive changes. And I hope we continue to include me on the socials. So thank you.
Hi, our cannabis was sort of the same. We had 23 original notices. Over half of them disappeared, but by the time we had sent out applications to really fill in and provide us with information, we ended up with 10. 2 didn't show at committee, so we disapproved them. 1 came, but was totally unprepared, so we disapproved him. And we approved 7, all very strong presentations with heavy sort of community service aspects to them. And for next month, it looks like we're only going to have 1. So we see this lull in the action as the early deadlines that OCM has set have kind of basically had their play, and we're now looking at maybe round 2 sometime in 2024. So I think we're past the worst. It helped to have our office staff very focused on follow-up with these folks. Just in terms of your 500 feet, we did get confirmation of OCM that it's on the street front rather than the radius that matters. So it's 500 feet on the same street for school location. That could create some complicated situations where you have around the corner, a school that, but I think we get to notice that in the concerns. We had multiples for the same site, but that's up to OCM to figure out, not us. So we just went with the details that we had. Yeah.
When they told you same street, what I was told was it's corner to corner, front to back. It's about the boundaries of the building.
Right.
So it's not like the front door. If the school is
Exactly. Right.
If the school is a through block, it applies for both
All
blocks.
sides. Correct.
Sides.
Right. But if you walk away, but is within the 500 radius, you're
good.
You're not good. I mean, you're good to.
You're not within
You're not
within
good.
within the zone.
Yeah. We finally, we submitted a very, very detailed markup of the OT draft regulations, DOT draft regulations on outdoor dining. We had to schedule an additional committee meeting specifically for that purpose in order to be able to make the 30-day clock. But we did because we felt this was incredibly important to us. But we basically had a 1-page resolution with about a 30-page addendum that was really a red line of the existing resolution. So we got that in under the just squeaked under the time limit. We're noting that today the mayor's November plan comes out with cuts to agencies. We've sent a letter reminding the mayor that he committed to 1% for parks and basically asking that he not cut in the current year because we're so far below that, and asking him to keep his commitment next year. we're co-sponsoring with Landmarks West, a zoning amendment to include the former ABC site in the special Lincoln Square zoning district. And that's finally got a complete application now before city planning, and we expect a decision from them soon. It would not impact FAR on the site, but would prevent a too tall building from being built there if it is included. Our full board in November used a new voting system that was prepared by actually a board member who's an engineer. We voted by texting on our phones, and all of the votes of individuals and the totals were displayed on the big screen. And it cut close, I think, to half an hour out of the length of our meeting. It was a very, very heavy agenda, and we were out of there by 9. So it was really very worthwhile. Our board member is willing to put time into creating a more easy use interface for this if others are interested, but he won't do that unless there's a number of takers. So if anyone's interested in adapting this for their own use, please email me and let me know that. And if we get enough of those, we may proceed. I think that's it.
Just a quick note on that. So we had actually asked, I know Kyle through, I asked Jesus if he would consider coming to present at Borough Board and Borough Service Cabinet next month because of what you guys have done with the Airtable, which is just after my own heart in terms of how that looks and feels, and that seems really interesting. I may follow up and see if we can get ahead and come to Borough Board and Borough Service Cabinet next month anyways, just to wrap it all up together. If you haven't seen CB6's website with what they're doing with their resolutions, it's very impressive.
I just about it. So we've actually completely modernized our website. They also talking about it last one too as well. So if you go to our website, cbsix.org, it's completely accessible, first of all. And then we created something called the resolution tracker, which is through Airtable, where you can see live all of the resolutions that we're working on. We've actually digitized all of our resolutions. I think the earliest is like 1980 something. So, and you have all these search terms that you can put to it as well. So at any given point, any board member, public person can kind of search a term and see all the resolutions that were either on a particular committee or related to a specific item. So yeah, so always offering if anyone wants to learn more about how we implemented that. Obviously, there was a big cultural change when we implemented that 3 years ago. So if anyone is dealing with that,
I love it so much.
Jesus is obviously the technical person behind it all.
I'm sure I'll ask you to speak on it too. We're gonna do the whole presentation thing so you can all see it, but you should play around with it. It's really impressive. I really very much like it from a transparency, good government sort of.
It's actually right now.
Me.
So you can just
So my question would be, what kind of resources can the Borough President's Office
Airtable's a completely free program, but you can use it
provide to get it takes time and energy and labor to get it's not just a import.
Airtable has just informed us they are going to start charging.
I'm gonna have to see what the pricing is there. At least I need a little bit, see, I've heard that same thing, we still are using the same rate account.
Well, we are too, but they have informed us that's gonna stop.
Okay. I mean, I'm thinking
We just don't have the band, like, it takes technical expertise to do a full website conversion and changeover, and it takes time, and we just don't have staff or bandwidth.
I mean, we will have more conversations about this. Obviously, we're always on the record saying that we should have more budget for community boards. We're always, Mark has testified at every budget hearing on this sort of thing. We've constantly been on the side of community boards needing more resources. And we'll point out, it's not a full website convert. I mean, they're using an accessible platform. And I would think that if you're using the city's website, then it is an accessible platform as well. Airtable is something that their district manager has taken on, and which is why we've asked this district manager to come both to the Borough Board and Borough Service Cabinet to try to get other district managers to think of this as a worthwhile project to take on. You know, we can talk about other ways to try to project manage this in a way that would unless we get more money from the budget. But as we just heard from before about PEGs, I'm very happy that community boards were included in that, but I also realistically don't see like more money coming in the next few months. And if your office is interested in doing this, then I think hearing Jesus out on how he did it with his limited resources is a worthwhile time. I will say that, yeah, I heard the same thing about Airtable. So we're waiting to see pricing because we use the same thing, but for right now it is a free service that we've been using, and we use it for all of our community board applications, but I have not seen it used in this application by another board, and it is very good at like just kind of tracking and may satisfy those board members, including yourselves, who are a little bit more detail oriented and wanting to follow through on where things are, or have been on the board for 5 years plus and all of a sudden recall like a reso that you did, just like right to council or something like that, where you're like, wait, I think I did this already. Sort of
Yeah, and
thing.
one of the reasons we did it too is to find that there were a lot of people, we hear institutional knowledge a lot, but never really in practice sometimes. And so if, you know, a particular member, especially if they were newer, wanted to kind of see the history of something, they weren't able to do that really easily. And then also for people who felt like, you know, the full board was the first time they were seeing something, whether they were on the board or in the public, we wanted to increase transparency as well. So as soon as one of the things that I tasked all of my committee chairs with doing is to be prepared to a meeting with a drafted resolution that they work on in the committee itself, so that that automatically gets uploaded to the Airtable as soon as their committee is done, so that even before full board, it appears in our Airtable as like pending, as a pending item, so people from the public can see it, so that when they do show up to full board, it's not like they can make a public comment and that, you know, they don't find out, oh, I'm not allowed to participate in the actual committee discussion at full board, it's only board members, and then that's it, and they don't get upset. So those were the two main reasons we started.
So just as someone I think I would love to hear more and get maybe that's what we just have him kind of for board next month too, so he can present for it, at least we can have a little bit more of the voting technique, like virtually.
Yeah, I mean, if we set it up by having first a discussion at steering committee and a mock vote. And then we did a mock vote at full board before we went live with, you know, the actual votes for the evening. To do that, everybody has to give a phone number that we enter into the back end, so that nobody who is, you know, not eligible to vote can possibly vote. And then you just, you know, you put in yes, no, abstain, and your phone, and that's it.
That's great. Okay, thank you. CD.
Okay, so we had our full board meeting last night. We had elections. Our first vice chair, Valerie Mason, was elected chair, so she will succeed me. So that's a bittersweet moment. You know, it's been great being chair. I'm going to save my goodbye for next month. I'm still chair for another month. But anyway, CBA will be in good hands in the coming year. We did last week have a Euler application still for a new residential building on manufacturing site, and just the context here is that the Borough President's report on affordable housing had identified manufacturing sites in our district as potential sites for new residential housing. We have these sort of old leftover kind of anachronistic manufacturing zones that were left over from the like Rhinegold Brewery days that we're trying to turn into housing, and we have a task force set up to do that. So this is the first ULURP application that wasn't sort of strictly part of that process, but essentially trying to turn these zones into residential zones and incorporated affordable housing as part of mandatory inclusionary housing. So we said yes with very substantial conditions, including increasing the affordability. But anyway, that's some progress, I would say, on the affordable housing front. In terms of open restaurants, which I know affects everybody, we passed a resolution related to the latest draft rules. We had passed resolutions previously in terms of what we would like to see. We did not, of course, get everything we wanted, and so we passed a resolution really emphasizing the point that I'll make here. We get a number of points, but the one I think most significant for our purposes is wanting to make sure that there was actually community board input when it comes to roadway cafes in the same way that we have it for sidewalk cafes. It just seems like a no-brainer. Why they're resistant to that. So that's I think a really important demand for us. And then we also, of course, have had a lot of cannabis applications to deal with. We were pretty successful in cutting down the ones we actually needed to look at to the ones that are actually ready for review in terms of actually being qualified for final approval because they have change of control. We managed to get the vast majority of the provisional ones to agree to lay themselves over until the next month, and with very few exceptions, which we then disapproved. So we approved a lot of cannabis applications yesterday. So we're making it through our applications that we have. So that is it for my report.
How many did you guys approve?
It's probably 10 maybe.
Did you disapprove them?
We did not disapprove any where the applicant came to the meeting and had all their stuff. We disapproved 3 where the applicant just didn't show up and wasn't ready in any of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good job. Okay, CV9.
Yes, good morning all. Still morning.
Good.
Start with the good news. As Keisha Sutton had mentioned, we had the holiday lights float parade on Tuesday. Really good turnout. 6 floats, DJs, kids on the side, and had watch parties going around the neighborhood. It was really encouraging, people getting into the spirit. Columbia hosted the initial part of that, which was great to work with them once again. So that was good. 5G towers, we were notified about 5G towers coming through the district to replace some of the Link NYC kiosks. So we had some concerns about that, 30-foot towers in some places as close as 10 feet to people's windows. We're putting something forth in writing actually tomorrow at the federal level. That's the cutoff date to do that. So we're really pushing that and had several people come and speak about that. Just the effects that could have on the community that's already suffering from other diseases. The rat containerization program, that's a pilot in our district, going well. Still some pushback from car owners, especially some seniors and private homeowners still say the containers are very high for them to lift up, put garbage in containers. So we're trying to keep in touch with the Department of Sanitation. That was a little bumpy start. The transparency department was definitely not there. The choice of the selection of streets did not happen through us. So we're trying to just build a better rapport with them. And then moving on, as far as rat sightings, people have said they've gone down. 311 forward less. We are just concerned about the 120 parking spaces that we've left. The most, some people don't care about that, but there are people that come to us and say, we're not going to park, still use a car. And cannabis applications, we definitely don't have as many as I've heard in the room. We're reviewing those. I've gone out and taken a look at some of the sites myself, and moving along, we have not disapproved any. We've made recommendations for approval for several, and just looking at the proximity to schools and houses of worship, which was a concern for us there. Attendance in person for quorum continues to be a problem for us. Actually, on my way down here this morning, I got something from someone who wanted to be virtual, but our rule was sending 2 hours in advance so we can see who's coming and who's not. So that, as people have already expressed, is an issue. We had a huge agenda last month. Quorum was reached by one person, just one person over. So we have all this stuff, and people just take it upon themselves to be virtually. It's like, where's so-and-so? There they are on the screen. It's like, wait. To me, it seems like one or the other, either in person or virtual. You give people options, they take them and take liberties that are not always their own. So that's kind of been a sore point with just getting us. And I tell people, it's not for everybody. You have something you're committed to elsewhere, then this might not be the thing for you right now. Right? Resign, let someone take it on that has the time, because we have real work to do right about now. So we'll see how that goes. I had the opportunity to meet with Gina Wright, First Deputy Mayor, earlier last week, and several topics, and one was Medicare for New York City retirees they're trying to move us on to, I'm a city retiree as well, onto Aetna, a for-profit organization with what I call gatekeepers. PCP recommends cardiologists. I have to go to Aetna to get that referral. It has not been brought to the city council floor yet. It's been blocked by several people. So I met Sheena, also met well city councilman to try to push this forward. The mayor claimed that $600 million could be saved this way, but on whose backs? He forgets that during the financial crisis, city workers took a hit. Promotions, raises, and things of this nature. Short-term memory is common often in the city. So we've saved before. Now we are in our twilight years. We deserve to have the medical coverage we've had all along without having an interruption. So I've been pushing that on several fronts. And that's
Thanks, Victor. I had a very long conversation with somebody in CD6 who felt exactly the same. I can't remember who it was, but it was running right out. I know that there's people who are working.
Oh, yeah.
Marquise was here, he had to leave. So I think that wraps it up. And Kathy was here as well, who also had to leave. I think we're gonna move on. Unless anybody's got anything else going.
Can I just share notes from Councilmember Borough?
Normally, we don't allow any representatives to speak, but if you would like to share, speak briefly, sure.
Okay. Yeah, I could just roughly just on legislation and some hearings that are coming up that might be
Are
important.
you coming tomorrow to Borough Service Cabinet?
I am not.
Okay. Normally, you're more than welcome.
That's fine, we can wait. That's fine.
I'll say that normally all of our agency reps and reps are given a speaking portion at Borough Service Cabinet. And if our elected officials here, we allow them to speak at the top of the meeting. But Cynthia, since you're
It's
turning
okay.
red, you can.
No,
do
it's
so.
fine. Everyone's
Sure.
been waiting a long time. It's fine. There's nothing really urgent.
Just stay here, and I'm glad you're sitting next to CB7 because CB7 is here, but stay here. So if anybody has any questions about anything that's going on in the district, they should know about it. Anybody? And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second. Okay, all in favor? Thank you. I think that takes it. Thank you guys. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I was able to last night, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
That's because Eric was running the meeting, was not like nicer than I am. I'm sorry.
No,
Um,
I figure the World Trade Center pack will have all the